My name is Anthony Tarracone from the Kreindler Law Firm in New York and Boston. I represent Shane Dennehy in all matters relating to the injuries he suffered in a boating accident on March 20th in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic. Mr. Tortorella, would you please state your full name for the record?
Brian James Tortorella.
And are we at your home?
Yes.
Here today? What's the address here?
3696 Downeyville Street, Loveland, Colorado, 80538.
And did you agree to give a statement today on video concerning what you observed on March 20th in Punta Cana involving Shane Dennehy?
Yes.
Would you simply relate what you recall of the incident?
Sure. So my wife and I were in this natural pool is what they called it, this cove. Just the two of us. We had taken a small private little skiff boat with a captain over to this pool. And while we were there, we kind of were commenting about how we didn't realize we were just being taken to this big party cove with, all these college kids. So right next to us was a big party boat full of college kids. It was right next to us with all these kids on it, and we were kind of watching and commenting. We had just at one point they were rounding up all of the kids out of the water. Most of the kids throughout the time we were there were kind of placed just in various spots around the boat, kind of hanging out and kind of scattered around in the water, which was, I would say average person maybe, chest or belly high or so. So they were kind of wading in the water and drinking. It was looked like local kids that were working for the company that were kind of rounding the kids up to put them on the boat, that were working for the boat. We had made some comments, we were watching because we had made some comments how the two local kids that seemed to be working for the boat were kind of groping all the girls as they were putting them onto the boat and kind of hanging on them, and even like kissing them on the cheek and stuff like that. So we were kind of watching all of this happen, and as they were about to take off, my wife had noticed a kid try to go down the slide. Well, the boat was about to leave, and most likely the slide did not have water going down it because apparently the kid kind of did a face plant onto the slide. So I did not see, which is Shane, go down the actual slide. My wife saw, and she made a comment to me. She said, oh, that kid just face planted on the slide. And by the time she said, he hit his head pretty hard, I looked over at that point and saw him right as he basically got into the water. Saw another kid come down the slide or come off the back of the boat not long after he did. And Shane, the first person that hit his head, which my wife saw hit his face, I saw him kind of pop up out of the water and kind of walked over or swam over to one of the outboard motors, and just kind of grabbed onto it, put his arm around it, and just kind of hung out there for a second. And it looked strange because we were watching him after he hit his face, kind of just looking at him like, is that kid okay? I guess he just hit his face pretty hard. But he was just hanging out on the outboard, and it looked like he just kind of hit his head real hard against the outboard, like almost. It was strange. It was a real quick jerk, and he kind of hit himself against the motor. And I said, "Oh, he just hit his head against the motor," and then he did it again, and I was kind of commenting like, "What's going on? Why is he hitting his head against the motor like so hard? Is the boat backing up into him?" But I was watching the boat for a second or two, and it didn't look like the boat was really moving, so I couldn't figure out why he was hitting his head. And then he kind of shook more violently and kind of jerked around a bit. And at that point, I kind of said to my wife, I said, there's no way they just turned that motor on, did they? And that's when I think we got a little concerned that maybe that's what had happened. And we started kind of making our way. At that point is when we started kind of walking over there and making our way towards it to see if he was okay, and he was kind of shaking a bit. And so then it seemed like that may have happened. The motor may have turned on or something was wrong. So we just kind of quickly swam over at that point. And when I got there, it was apparent that he was injured, and I kind of went to grab him and scoop him up on one side right away. My wife, had started shouting to people that were up on the boat, does anybody have a shirt or something they can throw down that we can use as a tourniquet? And as I was kind of grabbing him, that's when I turned to her and said, I have a tourniquet back in my bag on our boat. So she went back towards our boat. At this point, she was trailing behind me a bit because I was a little quicker in the water, so I kind of got to Shane and she was behind me. And she turned around to get the tourniquet. And by the time I was at Shane and had grabbed him, another kid kind of appeared on Shane's other side and grabbed him. And my guess is that that's the kid that followed Shane in after Shane went into the water.
Earlier you said that they were getting ready to leave. Other than seeing the two young Dominicans help the kids into the boat, was there anything else that indicated they were leaving?
I wouldn't say there was anything in particular that indicated they were leaving other than them rounding each kid up and placing them onto the boat. They didn't blow a horn, they didn't yell like time to go. I didn't hear.
Okay, so you didn't hear any kind of an announcement?
No, not that. I don't know who would have heard the music. Like, there was never a pause in the music, and it was very loud. We heard the music
The music from the boat?
Correct, from that party boat. We heard it from our location the whole time we were there. So there wasn't really a pause in any of that, My guess is they were kind of trying to, the two Dominican kids that were working on the boat kind of were trying to just, signal to the kids it's time to go, and we're kind of grabbing them and just pushing
So
them. So
these two young local kids who were there, were they in the water the whole time?
They may have been in and out, but we saw them in the water.
And when you say they were rounding up the other kids and getting them into the boat, explain what you mean.
Well, you could see they were just kind of doing this and shuffling them and pushing them and, more focused, I think, on the girls and kind of, going behind them and kind of pushing them. And like I said,
So they were physically pushing them up onto the boat?
They were physically pushing the girls up onto the boat by their butts. Yeah, so it was clear they wanted them on the boat, But yeah, they were physically either pushing, shoving, grabbing, to push them towards the boat. So at that point, I kind of quickly grabbed Shane under his arm. I think I grabbed his one arm, kind of put my arm under his armpit, and then propped my arm up onto the motor for support. And Shane kind of wrapped his arm around my arm and was holding my arm and kind of holding himself up a bit. So I had my left arm free, which wasn't much help because it was on the other side of Shane. And we were trying to move Shane away from the motor and get him onto the boat or whatnot, or get a look at him, but it was clear that we couldn't move him for some reason.
Was he entangled in the motor?
It seemed pretty obvious that he must have been entangled. So I told the kid on the other side, I said, I think he's caught in the motor. You need to hold him up on your own because I'm going to go underwater and see if I can see anything or see what I can see. And so I told the kid, make sure you hold him up. I didn't want him kind of sinking at that point. And I said, make sure you hold him up as much as you can and really lift him up. And so as he said, okay, the kid understood me. And as he did that, I think he kind of, got a little burst of strength and really lifted Shane up from, probably his butt on that side. And I noticed, I was trying to hold with my other arm underneath Shane as well. And I felt, what just seemed like, mushy flesh basically. And I kind of felt it, a lot of wet kind of flesh on my arm. And I looked over and I think the other kid had lifted Shane up so high that a large chunk of his injury just popped up out of the water. And I think it was pretty clear to us at that point that there was no need to go underwater and that I couldn't let go of Shane because it looked like he probably had very little leg left in that motor from what I could see. Shane was still wrapped in the propeller at this point. I was still supporting him. I could feel that the injury went up to Shane's groin because I could see and feel that it was all the way up to his hip bone basically, and there wasn't a lot there to put a tourniquet on. And I told him, you're going to have to go up higher by his hip because there's no flesh where we are basically. There's nothing here. I said, you're going to have to find some meat. And while all this was happening, a girl appeared in the water with, I remember I'm pretty sure it was just a crescent wrench. I remember like looking at it and thinking, oh geez, it was just an old rusty crescent wrench. And I remember thinking, good luck, because they were obviously they were going to try to take the propeller off at that point. And I think somebody was yelling, we need to take the propeller off, or one of us did, I don't know. And I remember thinking, this is going to be tough to take this off with that little rusty crescent wrench. And as we were, it didn't, it was a lot faster than I figured it would be, but they popped the propeller off while we were supporting and holding him. And then myself, the kid on the other side, the kid that had the tourniquet, that was using the tourniquet, I think Lori was probably in there too. Maybe another kid by that time. We all kind of carried him, above our shoulders onto the little ladder entry point on the side of the boat, and kind of pushed him onto there. And then at that point, it was clear to everyone on the boat. You could tell how nobody knew what was going on, because at that point is when you heard everybody start yelling and screaming and crying and stuff like that, because everybody finally saw Shane, I think, at that point, and saw what actually was happening.